has now expired. But in a letter signed by the acting clerk of the National Assembly, Dr. Yahya Danzaria, the Senate insisted that the suspension remains in force until the Court of Appeal rules on our case, describing the matter as sub judice. Senator Natasha's lawyer maintains that nothing stands in the way of our return, saying the senator has concluded plans to resume when plenary reconvenes later this month. Senator Apotu Udwagan was suspended on the 6th of March for insubordination following a dispute over a seat allocation on the floor of the chamber. This action that has also stripped her of her duties, aids, salaries, and office privileges, with both sides holding firm attention now shift to the judiciary to determine whether she returns to her seat or remains barred from legislative duties. In course of all of this controversy, the senator had alleged sexual harassment by leadership of the National Assembly or the Senate. But let me remind everyone how these all started. It all started from the seat where she was sitting joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Give me your own view. March till September, and in the Senator's estimation, 6 months is over and she's due to resume.
Well, what has happened really is again another indication that the whole controversy between the Senate President, Senator Godswill Akpabio, and Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan had more to do with personal ego. The personalization of the issue has now been vividly demonstrated by what is now evidently an act of lawlessness on the part of the Senate. If you read the resolution of the Senate, passed, I think, on the 6th of March, 2025, the resolution was quite explicit on the basis for a suspension, number one, the duration for which the suspension was subsists, the precondition that she was required to attain or satisfy before the suspension can or may either be lifted or the duration be reduced. So even on the basis of their own resolution, even by their own Senate resolution, Senator Natasha had the option of apologizing to the Senate and retracting the comments that she had made about her encounter with the Senate President, and what they said was going to a wrong seat or taking a seat that was not allotted to her. She had the option to apologize. She had the option to make amends in line with the expectation of the Senate. She chose to go to court to contest her suspension, because don't forget that there was a lawsuit pending before the 6th of March. She had preemptively challenged the processes which crystallized in her suspension. So if the Senate, in their own wisdom, felt that it was possible to even recall her without her having to serve or exhaust the tenure of the suspension, namely 6 months, by giving her a condition which she elected not to satisfy, what is now the basis in law? What is now the basis in morality? What is now the basis in common sense for anybody to say that having served out the term of a suspension, that the Senate can now say that because there is an ongoing appeal process at the Court of Appeal challenging the legality of the tenure or the suspension that she has fully served, therefore they can hide under the cloak of sub judice and say they are not going to recall her. I find the letter of the Senate embarrassing. I find it scandalous. I find it contemptuous. And I find it very disparaging of the sensibility of the Nigerian people, because it is simple. You cannot say that somebody who has served punishment apportioned to her exhaustively, having now served for 6 months, the issue of suspension has a last by operation of law. The suspension no longer subsists because it's a definite period. And the court have made it clear in a plethora, in a number of cases, that parliament cannot suspend a member indefinitely. Because if you go by their skewed, by their diabolical logic, it will mean that if the Court of Appeal gives the decision tomorrow on the first appeal by the Senate President and the appeal by Natasha, and either party choose to further appeal to the Supreme Court, which is civil. And the Supreme Court now decide that they are not going to decide the appeal till 2027. Senator Fabio is telling Nigerians that Natasha will not resume her legislative functions. I find this very preposterous.
Mr. Effiong,
I am not surprised at all.
Yeah, let's take this issue one after the other. In law, the processes are seems to be very straightforward. If you are going through a legal process, until such a matter is rested by any arm of the judiciary, either the appellate or the final court in the matter, one wouldn't have said the matter has reached its end, or else the parties, or if the parties have decided to stop and wouldn't go ahead to appeal the matter. But if there is an appeal that is pending, and the fact that they say, look, this matter is on appeal, yes, there is a judgment that was disagreed by the parties in the matter, it then means that the substantive matter, which is the suspension, is still being heard in the court. Does it not make sense, or the stance of the Senate, does it not make sense? Is it not just a normal course of law or judicial process that they are following?
No, not at all. You see, what I find very fascinating in this argument is that this is a fabricated controversy. This is a controversy that has been invented by the Senate. It doesn't really exist in the real sense. It is particularly, very outrageous that the Senate president happens to be a lawyer. Natasha is also a lawyer. Now, let's even go by the logic that you are putting forward. Let's play the role of the devil's advocate. Okay, there's an appeal process, an appellate process going on, right? And you are saying on the basis of sub judice, you cannot allow her to resume her legislative functions. Shown as that the 6th of March, when the same Senate suspended Natasha, was there no action in court? Did Natasha not go to court to seek an order to even restrain the Senate from suspending her? And notwithstanding that order, they proceeded? That is the first question. The second question is, what is the substance of the appeal? The substance of the appeal relates to the legality and the constitutionality of the 6-month suspension, which has now elapsed by a fraction of time, which has now run its course. The person penalized having served that tenure, because what they are now doing amounts to double jeopardy. There's somebody who has been penalized for a definite period, has served that definite period. Let me give you an example. It is like saying that somebody who has been tried in a court, convicted for a simple offense, sentenced to 6 months, remanded in the Kirikiri Maximum Custodial Center. The person served 6 months, but because the person is aggrieved by the conviction and the remand and the order putting the person in custody, the person has gone on appeal. Will the Nigerian Correctional Service now say that because this inmate, this prisoner, who has now exhausted the term of conviction, having served out the term, because that person has chosen to challenge the propriety of the conviction, and the appeal is pending, therefore we are still going to hold you in our facility because it is sub judice. We are not going to release you to enjoy your freedom, despite that you have served your imprisonment. This is the kind of witchcraft logic that the Senate is putting forward. It doesn't make sense. And year one law students will know better. So for the institution of the Senate to be desecrated in this manner, for Senator Fabio to use the office of the Senate president to pursue what is now demonstrably a personal vendetta, it now calls to question whether really was there a modicum of veracity in what Natasha said? If she lied about allegation against the Senate president, if all she said was false, why is Fabio not allowing time and history to vindicate him? How come that even after this woman has served her punishment, you are still saying she cannot resume her functions? There is no further resolution of the Senate saying that duration of suspension has been extended. In any event, they cannot suspend her further in law. So to now hide under the cloak of an appeal and say that because she's challenging your power to suspend her, she's challenging the basis upon which she suspend her, despite that she has said that she cannot resume her functions.
So now, let's look at it, Mr. Effiong. There are those who will say, understanding legislative processes, if you are suspended for a period of time, it means the legislative sitting period. And there are those who will calculate it in this way. And this has happened before. Mathematically speaking, the legislative sitting days are just about 3 days in a week. They sit on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursdays. Usually they don't sit on Mondays and Fridays, except if there are extraordinary things that happen. Now, it is those days that is said to be calculated to make up 6-month legislative sitting. And those who say, oh yeah, if you calculate that, which has become like a norm in the legislative language, that the term for Senator Akpotiuduaghan's suspension ceased. There are those who have that argument that even at that, a suspension will still linger more.
I'm not sure if any reasonable person can put forward that argument. But let's even assume, for argument's sake, that there are actually persons in this country who would advance that argument. The argument collapses on the face of it. The suspension speaks for itself. The instrument of suspension, the answer of the Senate. Go and look at the resolution of the Senate. You just heard the resolution where Akpabio read out a suspension. It is explicit that the Senate do resolve to suspend and hereby suspend Senator Natasha Akpotiuduaghan for 6 months. Not for 6 legislative calendar months. Take note of that. Because Parliament is elected for 4 years. For 4 years. Not for 4 legislative years. So if they are suspending a senator for 6 months, it's 6 months simpliciter. We shall say. And in any event, parliamentarians are not paid based on legislative sittings. Senator Akpabio collects monthly salary, not sitting allowances. They are not paid based on the days that are legislative days in quotes. They are paid cumulatively monthly. So you cannot say, in fact, there is no basis for this kind of argument because the tenure of lawmakers in Nigeria is 6 months, even though it's renewable. It is 6 months. Okay? So you cannot say that you will now manufacture a different calendar, a different algorithm to now determine what the 6 months is. In any event, I have read the letter from the clerk of the Senate to Senator Natasha. That is not the argument that they have put forward. I don't think they will put forward that argument. It will be silly, with profound respect. It will be the height of silliness for the Senate to say that they are going to calculate the 6 months based on legislative sitting days. I think at that point, Nigeria will now call to question whether they are actually educated people in the Senate. I don't think they will make that kind of argument. I don't think Akpabio would reduce himself to that level to now say that Senator Natasha, that by their own computation, the 6 months has not elapsed.
Mr. Effiong, quickly, if you were...
is the point some of us have been making.
Yeah.
This is a personal matter. Nigerians should stop making it about the legislative institution. This is a personal grievance between Senator Akpabio, who is the Senate President, and Senator Natasha. He's now using his office to achieve his own agenda. That is what this is about. The earlier they recall her, the better for them. Because they are now embarrassing the country for that. The international community will now continue to laugh at us as unserious people.
Now, it's one thing for the Senate to make a position as to what they believe the law represents or in their own interpretation of the law. The PDP has said, look, whatever the stand of the National Assembly is, it doesn't matter. The senator should go ahead and resume. If you were Senator Akpotiuduaghan's lawyers, would you advise differently?
If I were a lawyer, I would accompany her to the Senate. I will accompany her to the Senate to resume her legislative function.
Even if you are met with resistance, and she has seen those kind of resistance in the past.
Well, what is the alternative? You want her to go back to court and file an action to challenge their refusal to allow her resume, so that they will now say, oh, there is now even an action challenging whether the Senate has power to stop her from resuming or not. Let us wait till the court decides it. She should not, I do not think she should play into their hands. What they are doing is the height of the shift. She has to go back to court. You have to be the author. I hope it doesn't have to get to that. Because the Senate is a serious legislative body. Let Natasha go and resume her legislative functions. The letter from the clerk notwithstanding, the part on which that correspondence is written by the clerk has more value than the content itself. That paper that they used to communicate the abominable decision to her is worthless as far as I'm concerned. It is provocative. And we cannot simply continue this way and say that, oh, because it is about Natasha, because she's in the opposition, it's a precedent that they are setting. You cannot, and it is Primus inter pares. The same president in first among equal. She's not superior to Natasha. Akpabio is from my state, don't forget. He was governor of my state for 8 years. That is why some of us kept reminding Nigerians that we know the antecedents of this man. He doesn't forgive. Akpabio doesn't have a forgiving spirit, I can tell you. He's very vindictive. And I can also tell you that this is a man that will go to any extent to trample on the rights of people. I will stand by that any day because his tenure as governor, what the House of Assembly was. No, Akpabio doesn't understand opposition. You don't oppose Akpabio and get away with it. So what is happening to Natasha now? This has gone beyond seat allocation. Because in the first place, why are you suspending somebody for 6 months for presumably or purportedly taking a wrong seat? Does it make sense for 6 months that the people of Kogi senatorial district who voted for her, they have not had representation, they have not had an opportunity for her to raise matters of urgent national importance, they have not had an opportunity for her to sponsor a bill to support her constituents, they have not been able to communicate the grievances of her constituents to the Senate. You are basically denying them representation. You have done that for 6 months. This woman has suffered for 6 months. She has now served 6 months. You are still simply saying you are not going to allow her to resume. I think Nigerians should now realize that this has gone beyond Natasha. They are challenging us. They are spitting on our faces. This woman should be allowed to resume. Senator Natasha should be allowed to resume. There is no logic behind the clerk saying she cannot resume. There is no law in support of it. It is also immoral. This simply cannot continue. She has served her time. Allow her to resume. It's as simple as that. And what they are now doing is if they don't have any regard for common sense should have prevailed by now. Look at how this has brought on the harassment of the country.
All right.
Look at the level of coverage that international media has given to this matter. And you are still saying, over my dead body, she cannot resume. This is not how to run a country. This is not how to build this democracy. We are not going to build this democracy this way. Because this is now military attitude.
All right.
Militaristic attitude. Dictatorship.
Let
Natasha resume her functions. The law is on her side. Morality is on her side. Logic is on her side. History is on her side. What will Akpabio be remembered for on this issue of Natasha? Right. What is going to be his legacy? Other people have been Senate President Shewun. What are they remembered for today? This is going to define the Akpabio presidency as the Senate President. If it's not careful. And I'm worried, as someone from Akwa Ibom, that tomorrow, if I were to go to the Senate or someone from my state was to be a senator tomorrow and aspire to be Senate President, the embarrassing example of Godswill Akpabio will be cited to say, when somebody from your state was Senate President, this was how he embarrassed the country.